The morning sun cast long shadows across the asphalt of Henderson's Auto Repair in Portland, Oregon, as Marcus Davidson pulled his midnight blue 2018 BMW M4 into the lot. The October air was crisp, carrying the scent of rain that had fallen overnight, mixing with the familiar smell of motor oil and metal that permeated the neighborhood. Marcus had driven past this shop countless times on his way to his office downtown, never giving it much thought. Today, however, his pristine German machine had betrayed him with a check engine light that refused to be ignored. The shop itself was unassuming, a converted warehouse with large bay doors, its brick exterior weathered by Portland's notorious rain. A hand-painted sign hung above the entrance, the letters slightly faded but still legible. Marcus killed the engine and sat for a moment, his hands gripping the leather-wrapped steering wheel. He'd bought this car 3 years ago, right after making junior partner at his law firm. It represented everything he'd worked for: status, success, the tangible proof that his 60-hour work weeks meant something. As he stepped out, adjusting his tailored charcoal suit, Marcus noticed the shop's interior through the open bay door. It was cleaner than he'd expected, with organized tool chests lining the walls and 2 vehicles already on lifts. Classic rock played softly from a radio somewhere inside. A young woman emerged from beneath a silver Honda Civic, wiping her hands on a red shop towel. She was perhaps in her late 20s, with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, wearing navy coveralls with Henderson's embroidered on the chest pocket. "Morning," she called out, her voice friendly but professional. "You must be the BMW that called in." Marcus approached, his Oxford shoes clicking against the concrete. "Yes, I spoke with Henderson, the owner?" "That's my dad," she replied, extending an oil-stained hand before thinking better of it and withdrawing it with a slight smile. "He's out at a parts supplier. I'm Riley Henderson. I'll be taking care of your car today." Marcus felt his jaw tighten imperceptibly. He'd specifically asked to speak with the owner, hoping that meant someone with extensive experience. Someone who understood the intricacies of European automotive engineering. He glanced at Riley, taking in her worn work boots and the smudge of grease on her left cheek. She couldn't have been working on cars for more than a few years. "I see," Marcus said, his tone cooling several degrees. "When will your father be back? This is a fairly sophisticated vehicle, and I'd prefer someone with more, extensive experience handle it." Riley's expression didn't change, but Marcus noticed a slight shift in her posture, a straightening of her spine, a lift of her chin. "I understand your concern, Mr. Davidson. BMWs are beautiful machines. I've been working on them for about 8 years now. Got my start at a BMW dealership in Seattle before. Coming back to help my dad. But if you'd rather wait for him, he should be back in about 2 hours. 2 hours. Marcus checked his watch, a Swiss timepiece that cost more than most people's monthly rent. He had a client meeting at 11 and another at 2. The check engine light had been accompanied by a slight hesitation in acceleration, something he couldn't ignore even if he wanted to. "What's your diagnostic process?" Marcus asked, crossing his arms. Riley walked toward the BMW, her movements confident and unhurried. "First, I'll hook it up to our diagnostic computer. We have the factory-level software for BMW, Mercedes, Audi, the works. That'll give me the error codes. Then I'll do a visual inspection of the engine bay, check all the connections, look for any obvious issues. Depending on what the codes say, I might need to do a compression test or check the fuel system. M4s from that year sometimes have issues with the high-pressure fuel pump, or it could be ignition coils. Won't know until I run the diagnostics." Marcus was impressed despite himself. Her answer was thorough, methodical. Still, this was his car, his pride and joy. "Look," he said, his voice firm but not unkind. "I'm going to be straight with you. This car means a lot to me. It's not just transportation. It's a significant investment. I need to know it's in capable hands." "I appreciate your honesty," Riley said, meeting his eyes directly. and I respect how much you care about your vehicle. But I can assure you, Mr. Davidson, I know what I'm doing. Every car that comes through these doors gets treated like it's my own. That said, if you're not comfortable with me working on it, I completely understand. No hard feelings if you want to take it to the dealership or wait for my dad. There was no defensiveness in her voice, no wounded pride, just calm professionalism. Marcus found himself in an awkward position. Walking away now would seem overtly rude, even discriminatory. He prided himself on being progressive, on judging people by their abilities. Yet here he was, hesitating solely because of assumptions based on age and gender. "Fine," he said finally, "but I want to be clear. Don't touch anything beyond the diagnostics without calling me first. I want to approve any work before you start." Riley nodded. "Standard practice. We never do work without customer approval. Let me get your keys and some information, and I'll have an answer for you within the hour." As Marcus handed over his key fob, he felt a pang of anxiety. The BMW chirped as Riley unlocked it and slid into the driver's seat. She adjusted the seat and mirrors with practiced efficiency, started the engine, and listened intently. Marcus watched as she let it idle. Her head tilted slightly, picking up nuances in the engine note that he'd never consciously registered. She drove it into the bay with a smoothness that suggested she was comfortable with high-performance vehicles. Once positioned, she popped the hood and began her inspection. Marcus stood at the edge of the bay, feeling simultaneously intrusive and protective. Other customers didn't hover like this, he realized, but other customers probably didn't have $45,000 sitting on that lift. Riley moved around the engine bay with methodical precision, checking hoses, connections, and fluid levels. She photographed several components with her phone, a practice Marcus had seen at the dealership. Documentation, professional. She then retrieved a sophisticated-looking diagnostic tool from a nearby cart and plugged it into the port beneath the dashboard. "Coffee's fresh in the waiting room if you want some," she offered, without looking up from the tablet-style screen displaying scrolling data. "Should have some answers in about 20 minutes. Marcus retreated to the small waiting area, a modest space with a coffee maker, a water cooler, and several mismatched chairs that had seen better days. Local automotive magazines sat on. A scratch coffee table alongside that morning's Oregonian. He poured himself a cup of coffee and sat down, but couldn't focus on anything. Through the interior window, he could see Riley working, her movements economical and purposeful. His phone buzzed. A text from his assistant, reminding him about the 11 o'clock meeting. He replied that he might be a few minutes late, hating the feeling of his carefully structured day slipping off schedule. 15 minutes later, Riley appeared in the waiting room doorway, tablet in hand. "So, I've got good news and bad news," she began, pulling up a chair across from Marcus. "The good news is, it's not the fuel pump, and your engine internals look healthy. The bad news is, you've got a failing ignition coil on cylinder 3, and based on the mileage and the codes, I'd recommend replacing all 6 while we're in there." "All 6? Marcus frowned. "If only one is failing." "True," Riley acknowledged, turning the tablet to show him the diagnostic data. "But these coils are wear items. You're at 62,000 miles. The fact that one's failing means the others aren't far behind. If we only replace one now, you'll likely be back in a few weeks or months for another. It's more cost-effective to do them all at once. Save on labor and you won't have to worry about it for another 50,000 miles. Marcus studied the data, though much of it was technical jargon beyond his expertise. "And if I only do the one?" "Totally your." "I call," Riley said without pressure. "The car will run fine with just the one replaced. You're just gambling on when the next one will go. Could be next week, could be next year. I've seen it go both ways." "What would you do if it was your car?" Riley leaned back, considering. "I'd do all 6, but I'm also someone who likes to prevent problems rather than react to them. Plus, I do my own labor, so the cost calculation is different for me." She smiled slightly. "Not everyone thinks like a mechanic. How much are we talking?" Riley pulled up an estimate on her tablet. Parts and labor, about 1,200 for all 6. About 300 if you just want the one. Marcus did the mental math. 1,200 wasn't insignificant, but it wasn't unreasonable either. He'd paid more than that for the suit he was wearing. "And you can do this today? Have you back on the road by 3:30 at the latest? I've got the parts in stock. Keep common BMW parts on hand because we get a fair number of European cars through here." Something shifted in Marcus's perception. Riley wasn't trying to upsell him with scare tactics or vague warnings. She'd presented the facts, offered her professional opinion, and left the decision entirely to him. No pressure, no condescension despite his earlier attitude. "All 6, he decided, "and I apologize for earlier, for implying you weren't qualified. That was unfair." Riley waved it off. "Don't worry about it. I get it all the time. People see a woman in her 20s and assume she's the receptionist or the parts runner. I've learned not to take it personally." She stood, tucking the tablet under her arm. "I'll get started right away. Should have updates for you around 1 if you want to check in, or I can call you when it's done." "I'll call," Marcus said. "I've got meetings downtown." As he walked back to his office, a 15-minute walk through Portland's Pearl District, Marcus found his thoughts returning to the shop. Riley's competence had been undeniable, her professionalism unshakable, even in the face of his skepticism. He felt a twinge of embarrassment at his own behavior. How many times had he argued cases about discrimination, unconscious bias, the importance of evaluating people as individuals? Yet confronted with his precious BMW, he defaulted to the exact kind of prejudiced thinking he claimed to oppose. His 11 o'clock meeting was with a tech startup seeking counsel on an acquisition. Marcus went through the motions, his usual sharp focus slightly diminished. During a break, he called the shop. Riley answered on the second ring. "Henderson's Auto." "Hi, it's Marcus Davidson. Just checking on the BMW. Perfect timing. I've got 4 of the 6 coils replaced. Everything's looking good. Found a small oil leak from the valve cover gasket while I was in there. Nothing urgent, but something to keep an eye on. Might want to address it in the next 6 months or so before it gets worse." "No. Extra charge for the inspection. Just wanted you to be aware." "Appreciate that. So still on track for 3:30? Should be wrapped up by 3. I'll call you when it's ready." "Thanks, Riley." "No problem." Marcus's afternoon meeting was a deposition, a contentious one, involving a former employee suing his client for wrongful termination. Normally, Marcus thrived in these confrontational settings, his ability to remain calm under pressure serving him well. Today, however, he found himself thinking about assumptions and judgments, about the employee's claims that he'd been passed over for promotion despite superior qualifications. At 3:15, his phone rang. Riley's voice came through clear and upbeat. "All done, Mr. Davidson. She's running smooth as silk. Actually purrs a little nicer than when you brought her in. All 6 coils replaced, connections cleaned, and I reset the adaptive fuel trim so the computer can relearn with the new parts. You're good to go whenever you can. Swing by. I'll be there in 20 minutes. The walk back to Henderson's gave Marcus time to think. The October afternoon had turned overcast, typical for Portland, with a cool breeze that carried the promise of more rain. Leaves in shades of amber and rust scattered across the sidewalks. When he arrived at the shop, Riley was standing by his BMW, which sat in the parking area looking somehow more alive than when he'd dropped it off. "Want to take it for a test drive before you settle up?" Riley asked, handing him the keys. Marcus started the engine. The difference was immediate. The idle was smoother, the slight roughness he'd grown accustomed to completely gone. He pulled out of the lot and drove a few blocks, accelerating through the gears. The hesitation had vanished. The car felt responsive, eager, the way it had when he'd first bought it. Back at the shop, he found Riley at the front counter with an invoice printed and ready. The total was exactly what she'd quoted. No Surprise fees, no additional charges for the valve cover inspection or the fuel trim reset. You do good work, Marcus said, pulling out his credit card. I'm sorry again for this morning. I judged you unfairly. Riley accepted the card with a genuine smile. I appreciate you saying that. Honestly, the fact that you came back and admitted it means more than if you'd just been polite from the start. Most people double down or just never come back. Well, you've earned a customer. I'll be back. For the valve cover work and anything else this thing needs. Looking forward to it. And hey, Riley added as she handed back his card and receipt, I get it. You love your car. That's not a bad thing. Just maybe give people a chance to prove themselves before writing them off. Marcus nodded, the words hitting closer to home than Riley probably realized. Wise advice. Thanks again. As he drove away, glancing in the rearview mirror at Riley returning to work, Marcus felt something he hadn't. Expected respect, certainly, but also a kind of humility. In one morning, a mechanic in coveralls had reminded a successful attorney that expertise comes in many forms, and that preconceptions, no matter how unconscious, have consequences. The BMW hummed beneath him, smooth and powerful, a machine restored to its optimal state by someone he'd almost dismissed entirely. Marcus made a mental note to leave a 5-star review online that evening. But more than that, he found himself looking forward to the valve cover appointment in a few months, curious to learn more about the woman who challenged his assumptions without ever raising her voice. Portland's afternoon traffic moved in its usual stop-and-start rhythm as Marcus merged onto Burnside Street. The sky had opened up with a light drizzle, and he activated the wipers, watching them sweep across the windshield in perfect synchronization. Everything about the car felt right again. Balanced, responsive, eager. He thought about the parallel between his morning interaction and the cases he worked on. How easy it was to recognize bias when it was someone else's problem, how difficult to see it in your own behavior. The law was supposed to be blind, but lawyers were human, bringing all their preconceptions and prejudices into the courtroom with them. His phone synced to the car's audio system, and his assistant's voice came through the speakers. Marcus, the Williamson brief is ready for your review. Also, you got a call from the Oregon Bar Association about that mentorship program you inquired about. The mentorship program. He'd been considering volunteering to work with young attorneys from underrepresented backgrounds. Now he wondered how many times he'd made assumptions about those young lawyers, evaluated them differently than he would their more privileged peers. Thanks, Amanda. I'll look at the brief first thing tomorrow. And go ahead and tell the Bar Association I'm definitely interested in the mentorship program. As the BMW carried him toward his Pearl District condo, Marcus reflected on the day's unexpected lesson. Riley Henderson had given him more than a mechanical repair. She'd held up a mirror, forcing him to confront his own biases, and she'd done it with grace, competence, and without making him feel small, even though he'd earned it. The rain picked up, drumming against the roof, and Marcus allowed himself a small smile. Sometimes the most important lessons came from the most unexpected. Teachers. And sometimes admitting you were wrong was the first step toward being better. 3 weeks had passed since Riley Henderson had repaired Marcus Davidson's BMW, and autumn had firmly established itself in Portland. The city was draped in its seasonal palette of greys and golds, rain arriving in steady sheets that washed the streets clean every afternoon. Marcus had kept his word, leaving a detailed 5-star review for Henderson's auto repair that highlighted not just the quality of the work, but Riley's professionalism and expertise. On a particularly wet Thursday evening, Marcus sat in his downtown condo, reviewing case files for an upcoming trial. His floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of the Willamette River, its surface pocked by raindrops, the lights of the city reflecting in distorted streaks across the water. His phone buzzed with a call from an unknown local number. Marcus Davidson, he answered, expecting a potential client or court clerk. Mr. Davidson, this is Riley Henderson From Henderson's Auto. Sorry to call so late. Marcus set down his pen, surprised. Riley, no problem at all. Everything okay with the BMW? Oh, the car's fine, she assured him quickly. I'm actually calling about something else. I know this is unusual, but I wanted to ask your advice. Legal advice, I mean. If you have a moment? Marcus leaned back in his chair, intrigued. Of course. What's going on? There was a pause, the sound of rain in the background suggesting Riley was calling from outside or a covered area. My dad's shop is in trouble. We got served with a lawsuit 2 days ago, and the lawyer we consulted wants a $20,000 retainer before he'll even really review the case. We don't have that kind of money, and I'm honestly not sure where to turn. What's the lawsuit about? Riley exhaled audibly. A customer, well, former customer now, is claiming we damaged his transmission during a routine oil change 6 months ago. He's suing for $15,000 in repairs, plus another $20,000 in emotional distress and lost wages. The whole thing is ridiculous. We documented everything from that service, and there's no way an oil change could cause transmission failure. But he's got a lawyer, and we're kind of drowning here. Marcus grabbed a legal pad, already making notes. Tell me exactly what happened, from the beginning. Riley's voice steadied as she walked him through the timeline. 6 months ago, in late April, a man named Derek Hutchins had brought in his 2015 Dodge Charger for an oil change and tire rotation. Standard service, nothing unusual. Riley had performed the work herself, following procedure exactly. Drain plug torqued to spec, new filter, correct oil grade and quantity. Everything documented with photos and a checklist. Hutchins had driven away satisfied, no complaints. Then, 3 months later in July, he'd returned claiming the car was leaking oil and the transmission was slipping. Riley's father, Tom Henderson, had inspected it and found that someone had overfilled the transmission fluid by nearly 2 quarts and cross-threaded the drain plug, neither of which could have been done during an oil change, which doesn't involve the transmission at all. We showed him the photos from the original service, Riley explained. The transmission drain plug we documented in April looked completely different from the damaged one in July. Plus, our service order clearly shows we only did engine, oil, not transmission service. He had receipts showing he'd taken it to a quick lube place in June, between our service and when the problem started. And he's claiming what exactly? Marcus asked, his lawyer instincts fully engaged. That we somehow damaged his transmission during the oil change, and that it took 3 months for the damage to show up. His lawyer sent a demand letter saying we're liable for all repairs and damages. When we refused to pay, they filed the lawsuit. Marcus tapped his pen against the pad. Do you still have all the documentation? Everything. Photos, service orders, the damaged drain plug we removed when he brought it back. I even pulled security camera footage from April, showing exactly what we did during his service. It's all time-stamped. Riley, this sounds like a frivolous lawsuit, possibly even fraud on Hutchins's part. With the documentation you have, you should be able to get this dismissed fairly quickly. That's what I thought. But the lawyer... We talked to said even frivolous lawsuits require defense, and that we'd be looking at 20 to 30,000 in legal fees by the time it's resolved, win or lose. We don't have that. The shop does okay, but we're not rich. My dad's been running this place for 28 years, built it from nothing. This could destroy us. Marcus heard the strain in her voice, not panic, but genuine fear for her family's livelihood. He thought about the woman who'd fixed his car with such skill and professionalism, who'd been gracious in the face of his condescension. The idea of her losing the shop to what sounded like an opportunistic lawsuit made his blood pressure rise. Let me look into this, Marcus said. Can you send me copies of everything? The lawsuit, all your documentation, the security footage if you can get it digital, everything? I can do that tonight. Mr. Davidson, I can't afford to pay lawyer rates. I looked you up after you left that review. I know you work for a big firm. I'm not expecting charity, but Send me the documents, Marcus interrupted gently. Let me review everything first, then we'll talk about costs. Fair enough? More than fair, thank you. Really. After hanging up, Marcus sat for a long moment, looking out at the rain-soaked city. He had a full caseload already, and his firm didn't typically handle small claims cases. This would be pro bono work if he took it on, which would require approval from the partners. But something about the situation and about Riley's predicament felt important. The documents arrived in his email an hour later. Marcus opened them on his laptop, spreading the case across his dining table. The lawsuit was sloppily written, full of vague accusations and legal terminology used incorrectly. The attorney representing Hutchins was someone Marcus didn't recognize, which wasn't unusual in Portland's large legal community. But a quick search revealed the lawyer had been sanctioned twice for filing frivolous claims. The documentation from Henderson's Auto, by contrast, was meticulous. Riley had photographed every step of the service, time-stamped and geotagged. The service order was detailed and signed by Hutchins. The security footage showed Riley performing the oil change, with clear views of the engine bay, nowhere near the transmission. Most damning was the receipt from the quick lube place, dated between Henderson's service and the alleged transmission problems. That establishment had actually performed a transmission fluid service. Marcus smiled grimly. This wasn't just defensible, this was counterclaim territory. The next morning, Marcus arrived at his office early and went straight to the senior partner's office. Gerald Patterson was a veteran attorney in his early 60s, with steel-grey hair and a reputation for both brilliance and pragmatism. "Jerry, you have a minute?" Marcus asked from the doorway. "For my favorite junior partner? Always." "What's up?" Marcus explained the situation, laying out the documents on Gerald's desk. The senior partner listened intently, occasionally asking sharp questions. When Marcus finished, Gerald leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. "So let me understand this correctly. You want to take on a small claims case pro bono because the mechanic fixed your car well and now she's being sued frivolously. That's oversimplifying it. But essentially, yes." Gerald picked up the lawsuit filing, reading through it with practiced speed. "This attorney, Brennan Krause, he's a bottom feeder. Files these kinds of suits hoping small businesses will settle rather than fight. Usually works too." He set down the papers. "You know we don't usually do pro bono work for non-corporate clients." "I know. But this is exactly the kind of case the bar encourages us to take, helping a legitimate small business defend against what looks like attempted fraud. And honestly, Jerry, these people helped me when I was being a judgmental ass. I owe them." Gerald raised an eyebrow. "Judgmental ass? That doesn't sound like you." Marcus explained the full story of his initial interaction with Riley, his assumptions and her grace. Gerald listened, nodding occasionally. "Well," the senior partner said finally, "I appreciate the honesty. And you're right, this is the kind of case that reflects well on the firm. Community service, protecting small business, exposing bad actors in the legal community. Tell you what, I'll approve it as pro bono with one condition." "What's that?" "You write it up as a case study for our young associates about unconscious bias and professional judgment. We're always looking for real-world examples for training." Marcus extended his hand. "Deal." That afternoon, Marcus drove to Henderson's Auto Repair. The October rain had given way to a brief window of weak sunshine, the kind of break in the weather that made Portlanders emerge from their homes like flowers after winter. Riley was in the bay, working on a Subaru Outback, but her father Tom was in the small office adjacent to the waiting room. Tom Henderson was a bear of a man in his mid-50s, with graying brown hair, weathered hands, and eyes that assessed Marcus with the same measured intelligence his daughter possessed. He stood from behind a desk, cluttered with invoices and parts catalogues. "Mr. Davidson, Riley said you might stop by." Tom Henderson. His handshake was firm, his palm calloused from decades of work. "Please, Call me Marcus. Is there somewhere we can talk privately? Tom led him to the office and closed the door. Through the window, Marcus could see Riley glancing their way, curiosity evident on her face. Tom gestured to a worn chair across from his desk. Riley filled me in on your conversation last night, Tom began. I want to be straight with you. We're grateful for any help, but we can't afford big legal bills. This shop is everything I've got. My wife passed 8 years ago, and Riley came back from Seattle to help me keep it running. If we lose this place, you're not going to lose it, Marcus said with more confidence than legal prudence probably warranted. I've reviewed all the documentation. This is a weak case, possibly fraudulent. My firm has agreed to represent you pro bono, no charge. Tom's expression shifted from guarded to stunned. No charge? Why would you do that? Because Riley does good work, and because this lawsuit is garbage designed to intimidate you into settling. Also, because I owe you both an apology for my behavior when I brought my car in. This is my way of making amends. You don't owe us anything, Tom said quietly. Riley said you apologized. That's more than most people do. Maybe, but I'm still taking the case. I'll need you to sign some engagement documents, and I'm going to need to ask you both some questions about the timeline and procedures. But Tom, I'm confident we can get this dismissed, and possibly go after Hutchins and his attorney for the costs of defense. For the first time since Marcus had arrived, Tom Henderson smiled, a genuine expression of relief that made him look younger. I don't know what to say. Say you'll help me build the strongest case possible. Tell me everything about Derek Hutchins, every interaction you had with him. They spent the next hour going through every detail. Tom's memory was excellent, his records impeccable. Hutchins had been a customer for about 2 years, always polite, but often trying to negotiate. Prices down, or questioned the necessity of recommended services. Nothing unusual. Many customers did that. But there had been one incident 6 months before the oil change where Hutchins had insisted Tom was overcharging for brake pads and demanded to see the wholesale invoice. Did you show him? Marcus asked. Yeah, to keep the peace. He quieted down after that, but I got the sense he was the type who always thinks he's being ripped off. Riley joined them after finishing with the Subaru, wiping. Her hands clean before shaking Marcus's hand. So you're really doing this? Already did. You're officially represented. Marcus pulled out his business card and handed it to both of them. From now on, any communication about this lawsuit goes through me. If Hutchins or his lawyer contact you, be polite, but refer them to me immediately. Don't discuss the case. Don't try to explain anything. Let me handle it. What happens next? Riley asked, taking a seat on a stool near the desk. I'll file a response to the lawsuit, then move for dismissal based on the evidence you've provided. I'm also going to file a counterclaim against Hutchins for attempted fraud and against his attorney for filing a frivolous lawsuit. We're going to make this expensive enough that they'll think twice about trying this again with another shop. Tom shook his head in wonder. You're really going after them? Absolutely. People like Hutchins and lawyers like Krauss operate by intimidating honest businesses who can't afford to fight back. When someone does fight back, they usually fold quickly. Marcus stood, gathering his notes. I'll keep you updated on everything. Should have some movement within the next week or two. As he walked back to his car, Riley followed him out. The afternoon had turned cold again, clouds rolling in from the west, but she seemed not to notice. Marcus, she called. He turned, and she continued. Thank you, really. You didn't have to do this. I know, but sometimes the right thing and the thing you want to do are the same thing. This is one of those times. Riley smiled. Well, when this is over, oil changes are free for life on that BMW. Marcus laughed. I'll still pay you. Good work deserves fair compensation. Then we agree to disagree, Riley said, extending her hand. This time her grip was firm and confident. No oil stains to worry about. Looking forward to working with you, counselor. Driving back downtown, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in a while, the satisfaction of using his skills for something genuinely meaningful. Corporate law paid well and had its challenges, but defending Henderson's auto repair felt personal in a way his usual casework didn't. That evening, he drafted the response to the lawsuit and the counterclaims, each document precise and devastating. He cited case law, attached the photographic evidence, and laid out a timeline that made Hutchins's claims not just unlikely, but impossible. The counterclaim against Krause was particularly satisfying. 3 separate violations of Oregon's rules of professional conduct, all documented. Before sending everything to the court, Marcus called a colleague who specialized in insurance fraud. After hearing the details, she confirmed what Marcus suspected. This had all the hallmarks of a staged claim. The quick lube place that had serviced Hutchins's car between Henderson's oil change and the alleged transmission problems. It had been sued 4 times in the past 2 years for similar claims, always settling out of court. Marcus added that information to his filing. This wasn't just about defending Henderson's auto anymore, it was about exposing a pattern of fraud that had likely victimized multiple businesses. When he finally submitted the documents electronically to the court at 11 that night, Marcus sat back with a cup of coffee and looked out at the Portland skyline. Rain streaked the windows again, the city a blur of lights in. The darkness. His phone buzzed with a text from Riley. "Dad told me what you're doing with the counterclaim. You're kind of a badass, you know that?" Marcus smiled and typed back, "Just doing my job. Get some rest. We've got this." The response came immediately. "I believe you. Thank you again." As Marcus prepared for bed that night, he thought about the strange chain of events that had led him here. A check engine light, a moment of prejudice, an apology, and now a legal battle that felt more important than any corporate merger he'd ever worked on. Sometimes, he reflected, the best clients found you in the most unexpected ways. And sometimes, fixing a BMW led to something far more significant than a smooth-running engine. 2 weeks after Marcus filed the response and counterclaims, the case of Hutchins vs. Henderson's auto repair had taken on a life of its own in Portland's legal community. Marcus's filings had been thorough and damning, painting a clear picture not just of an unjustified lawsuit, but of a pattern of fraud involving Derek Hutchins, attorney Brennan Krause, and potentially the quick lube establishment that had serviced Hutchins's vehicle between the Henderson's oil change and the claimed transmission failure. On a grey November morning, Marcus sat in his office reviewing the latest developments. Krause had responded to the counterclaim with a motion to dismiss, claiming Marcus's allegations were unfounded and defamatory. It was exactly the defensive posture Marcus had expected from a lawyer caught in an ethical trap. The motion was poorly argued and full of procedural errors that suggested Krause was panicking. Marcus's phone buzzed with a call from Tom Henderson. "Marcus, we got another letter. Certified mail. It's from Hutchins's insurance company. Open it and read it to me." The sound of tearing paper came through the line, then Tom's voice, uncertain. "It says they're investigating the claim Hutchins filed with them about the transmission damage. They want copies of all our service records and documentation. Is this good or bad?" A smile crossed Marcus's face. "It's very good. It means someone at the insurance company read our counterclaim and started asking questions. They're realizing Hutchins might be trying to defraud them too. Send them everything. I'll draft a cover letter explaining our position." "So they're on our side now?" "Not exactly, but they're definitely not on Hutchins' side anymore. Insurance. Companies don't like being lied to. They've got resources and motivation to investigate this thoroughly." After ending the call, Marcus reached out to his contact at the insurance fraud division. Sarah Chen was a sharp investigator he'd worked with on a previous case, and she was very interested in what Marcus had uncovered. "Let me get this straight," Sarah said over lunch at a downtown bistro the next day. "Hutchins takes his car to Henderson's for an oil change in April. Then in June he goes to Quick Stop Lube, which you've identified as being sued repeatedly for similar claims for transmission service. Then in July, he's back at Henderson's claiming they damaged his transmission during an oil change 3 months earlier. Exactly. And his lawyer, Kraus, has been sanctioned twice for filing frivolous claims. The whole thing stinks. Sarah made notes on her tablet. What do you need from me? Information. Quick Stop Lube has settled at least 4 cases in the past 2 years. I need to know if Hutchins was involved in any of them or if there's a connection between him and any of those other claims. I'll dig into it. This could be bigger than one fraudulent lawsuit. Sarah paused, then added, Why are you doing this pro bono? Not that I'm complaining, but this isn't your usual type of case. Marcus set down his coffee cup, considering how to answer. Because Riley Henderson is one of the best mechanics I've ever met, and her family doesn't deserve to be victimized by scammers. And honestly, because I was a judgmental idiot when I first met her, and this is how I make that right. Sarah raised an eyebrow. You? Judgmental? Do tell. Marcus explained the whole story. His initial skepticism about Riley's abilities, her professionalism despite his attitude, the quality of her work. Sarah listened with growing amusement. So your BMW broke down, forced you to confront your own biases, and now you're fighting fraud on behalf of a small auto shop. That's quite an arc. When you put it that way, it sounds almost dramatic. Life's like that sometimes. Okay, I'll do some digging. Give me a week. That week proved to be eventful. Kraus filed another motion, this time requesting that Marcus be sanctioned for making inflammatory and unsubstantiated allegations in the counterclaim. Marcus responded with a 10-page brief that was so thoroughly researched and precisely argued that even Gerald Patterson, reviewing it before filing, whistled appreciatively. "You're not holding back, are you?" Gerald commented. Kraus opened the door when he filed that sanctions motion. Now I get to walk through it and lay out exactly why his client is a fraud and why he's complicit. The brief detailed every suspicious element of Hutchins' claim, referenced Oregon case law on fraudulent lawsuits, and included declarations from 3 other Portland-area auto shops that had been approached by Hutchins with similar claims over the past 3 years. Claims that had never gone to court, but had resulted in settlement payments ranging from $2,000 to $5,000. "Where did you find these other shops?" Gerald asked. Riley knew 2 of them. Small world in the independent shop community. They talked to each other. When I started asking around, people were eager to share their experiences. Hutchins has been running this scam for years, just keeping the amount small enough that shops would rather pay than fight, until he ran into someone who wouldn't pay. Until he ran into Tom and Riley Henderson, who happened to document everything and happened to fix the car of someone who could fight back. The filing of Marcus's response brief brought immediate consequences. The judge assigned to the case, the Honorable Patricia Martinez, scheduled an emergency hearing for the following week. Her order noted serious concerns about the nature of the plaintiff's claims and the conduct of plaintiff's counsel. Marcus called the Hendersons to update them. Riley answered, and he could hear the sounds of the shop in the background, air tools, the roll of a creeper, the distinctive sound of an engine being diagnosed. "How are you holding up?" Marcus asked. "We're okay. Busy, actually. Word got around somehow about the lawsuit, and we've had a lot of customers coming by to show support. Some of them are former customers of Quick Stop Lube who had problems after service there. That's helpful, actually. Would any of them be willing to provide statements?" "Already got 3 written statements sitting on Dad's desk. Figured you might need them." Marcus smiled. Riley thought like an investigator, always anticipating the next move. "You're reading my mind. Can you scan those and send them over?" "Will do." "Marcus, what's going to happen at this hearing next week?" "Judge Martinez is going to ask some pointed questions about why this case was filed and whether it has any merit. She's going to want answers from Hutchins and Kraus. I'm going to present our evidence and argue for dismissal with prejudice, meaning Hutchins can never refile. I'm also going to ask for sanctions against Krauss and attorney's fees, even though we're pro bono. Why ask for fees if we're not paying you? Because it establishes the principle that filing fraudulent lawsuits has consequences. If the judge awards fees, they get paid to a legal aid fund. It's not about the money. It's about accountability. The day of the hearing arrived cold and rainy, typical November weather for Portland. Marcus arrived at the Multnomah County Courthouse early, taking a moment to appreciate the historic building's architecture, classic and solid, a physical representation of the law's permanence. Riley and Tom arrived 20 minutes before the hearing, both dressed in neat business casual attire that made Riley almost unrecognizable from her usual coveralls. She saw Marcus and waved, her expression nervous but determined. "You ready?" Marcus asked as they met outside the courtroom. "As ready as I'll be," Riley replied. "Never been in a courtroom before. Just stay calm, answer truthfully if you're asked any questions, and let me do the talking. Judge Martinez is fair but tough. She doesn't suffer fools or frauds." Derek Hutchins arrived with his attorney Brennan Krauss moments before the hearing was scheduled to begin. Hutchins was in his early 40s, with slicked-back hair and an expensive suit that seemed at odds with someone claiming financial distress from car repairs. Krauss was younger, perhaps 35, with the kind of aggressive energy that suggested overcompensation for lack of skill. They took their seats on the opposite side of the gallery, Hutchins whispering urgently to his lawyer. Krauss's expression was tense. "All rise," the bailiff announced, and Judge Martinez entered. She was a woman in her late 50s with silver-streaked black hair and sharp, intelligent eyes that missed nothing. She took her seat and reviewed the files before her. "We're here on the matter of Hutchins versus Henderson's Auto Repair," she began, "as well as the related counterclaims filed by the defense. I've reviewed all the filings, and I have serious concerns about this case. Mr. Krauss, I'm going to give you an opportunity to explain to me why your client's lawsuit has merit in light of the evidence presented by the defense." Krauss stood, adjusting his tie. "Your Honor, my client is a victim of negligence. Henderson's Auto performed shoddy work that resulted in—" "Stop," Judge Martinez interrupted. "I asked you to explain how the lawsuit has merit in light of the defense's evidence. That evidence includes time-stamped photographs showing your client's vehicle before and after service, security footage of the service being performed, and proof that another establishment serviced the transmission between Henderson's oil change and the alleged damage. How do you account for that?" Krauss faltered. "Your Honor, we dispute the authenticity of that evidence, and on what basis? We believe it may have been fabricated or altered." Judge Martinez's expression hardened. "That's a serious allegation, Mr. Krauss. Do you have any evidence to support it? We're prepared to hire an expert to examine." "So you have no evidence. You're making accusations without foundation." The judge turned to Marcus. "Mr. Davidson, you're representing the defendants?" Marcus stood. "Yes, Your Honor. I've read your filings with great interest. You've made serious allegations of fraud. Walk me through your evidence." Marcus spent the next 15 minutes presenting the case methodically. He showed the photographs from April's service, the security footage, the receipt from Quick Stop Lube dated in June. He introduced the statements from other shops about Hutchins's pattern of claims. He presented Sarah Chen's preliminary findings showing that Hutchins had filed insurance claims for vehicle damage at least 6 times in the past 5 years, always against small independent shops. Judge Martinez listened intently, occasionally asking questions that demonstrated she was following every detail. When Marcus finished, she turned back to Krauss. "Mr. Krauss, do you have any evidence that contradicts what we've just heard?" Krauss looked at Hutchins, who shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Your Honor, we'd like to request a continuance to—" "Denied." Answer my question. Do you have any evidence? Not at this time, but... Then I'm granting the defendant's motion to dismiss with prejudice. This lawsuit is frivolous and appears to be fraudulent. Mr. Hutchins, you're ordered to pay the defendant's attorney fees in the amount of... She paused, reviewing Marcus's filing. $30,000, which Mr. Davidson has requested be donated to the Oregon Legal Aid Fund. Hutchins shot to his feet. That's insane. I can't afford... Sit down, Mr. Hutchins, Judge Martinez said coldly. You attempted to defraud these people. You're fortunate I'm not referring this to the district attorney for criminal prosecution, though I'm strongly considering it. She turned to Krause. As for you, counselor, I'm sanctioning you $5,000 for filing a frivolous lawsuit. Additionally, I'm referring your conduct to the Oregon State Bar for disciplinary review. You have a pattern of these filings, and it ends now. The courtroom was silent, except for the rain pattering against the windows. Judge Martinez's gaze swept across everyone present. This court will not tolerate attempts to abuse the legal system to defraud honest businesses. Mr. and Ms. Henderson, you've been vindicated. Your reputation is intact. Mr. Davidson, excellent work. This case is dismissed. The gavel came down with a sharp crack. As they filed out of the courtroom, Riley looked stunned. Tom's eyes were bright with emotion. Behind them, Hutchins was arguing furiously with Krause, who looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. Outside in the courthouse corridor, Tom grabbed Marcus's hand in both of his. I don't know how to thank you. You don't need to thank me. Justice was served today. That's thanks enough. Riley was quieter, her usual confidence momentarily overwhelmed. $30,000 to legal aid. That's going to help a lot of people. People like your dad, who can't afford to defend themselves against scams. That's the point. Make it expensive enough that fraudsters think twice. As they walked out, into the November rain, Riley turned to Marcus. So what happens now? To Hutchins and Krause? Hutchins owes $30,000 he probably doesn't have. His insurance company will likely deny all his claims and possibly pursue fraud charges. Krause is looking at bar discipline, possibly suspension, and every shop in Portland is going to know to watch out for both of them. Tom excused himself to make a phone call, leaving Marcus and Riley standing under the courthouse portico, watching. The rain. You know what's funny? Riley said. 3 months ago you thought I couldn't handle your BMW. Now you just saved our shop from bankruptcy. Marcus smiled ruefully. I was an idiot 3 months ago. You were human. We all make snap judgments. The difference is what you do after you realize you were wrong. She turned to face him directly. You could have just apologized and moved on. Instead, you went to war for us. That says a lot about who you are. Or it says I really hate seeing good people getting screwed over by con artists. Maybe both things are true. Riley checked her watch. Dad and I need to get back to the shop. Got 3 cars waiting. But Marcus, you're invited to Thanksgiving dinner at our place. I won't take no for an answer. It's the least we can do. Marcus started to protest, but something in Riley's expression stopped him. This wasn't about obligation or repayment. It was about connection, about acknowledging that something meaningful had formed between them through this whole experience. I'd be honored, he said. As the Hendersons headed to their truck and Marcus to his BMW, he reflected on how much had changed since that October morning, when he'd reluctantly handed over his keys to a mechanic he'd underestimated. He'd learned lessons about humility, about the many forms expertise could take, and about the importance of fighting for what was right. The rain intensified as he drove back to his office, but Marcus barely noticed. He was already thinking about his next case, his next client, and how he could apply the lessons of the past few months to everything he did going forward. Sometimes, he thought, the most important victories happened in small courtrooms, defending people most lawyers would never meet, and sometimes those victories meant more than all the corporate triumphs in the world. Thanksgiving arrived cold and clear in Portland. One of those rare late November days when the rain paused and the city emerged, bright and clean under a pale blue sky. Marcus drove through northeast Portland toward the address Riley had texted him, his BMW running smooth as silk after its months of flawless performance. The Henderson house was a modest craftsman-style home in the Beaumont neighborhood, with a well-maintained yard and a garage that clearly served double duty as Tom's personal workshop. Marcus could see the corner of a classic car, looked like a 60s-era Mustang, peeking out from under a cover. He parked on the street and grabbed the bottle of wine he'd brought, a nice Oregon Pinot Noir recommended by a sommelier friend. Riley answered the door in jeans and a burgundy sweater, her hair down for the first time Marcus had seen, falling past her shoulders. She looked younger, more relaxed than in either her work coveralls or the business casual she'd worn to court. "Right on time," she greeted him with a warm smile. Come in. Fair warning, there's like 15 people here. I might have..." Undersold the size of this gathering, the house was warm and filled with the rich aromas of roasting turkey, fresh bread, and pumpkin pie. The living room was crowded with people of various ages, from Tom's mechanic friends to what looked like extended family members. A football game played on a modest TV in the corner, largely ignored in favor of conversation. Tom emerged from the kitchen wearing an apron that read, "I turn grills on," and greeted Marcus with his characteristic firm handshake. "Marcus, glad you could make it. Hope you brought your appetite." Over the next hour, Marcus met the extended Henderson circle. Riley's uncle Frank, a retired machinist who taught Tom half of what he knew about engines. Her cousin Jessica, a high school science teacher who shared Riley's sharp intellect and direct manner. Several of Tom's longtime customers who'd become friends. A few of Riley's friends from her Seattle days, mechanics and engineers who spoke their own technical language that sounded like poetry to those who understood it. What struck Marcus most was the genuine warmth of the gathering. These weren't people connected by obligation or social climbing. They were bound by authentic affection and mutual respect. The conversations ranged from carburetors to college football to local politics, everyone welcome to contribute regardless of their expertise. During dinner, crowded around an extended table that barely fit everyone, Tom stood to offer a toast. "I'm not much for speeches," he began, "but this year has taught me a few things worth sharing. Back in October, I thought we might lose everything we'd built. Someone tried to take advantage of us, tried to use the legal system to destroy what we'd spent decades creating. And honestly, I was scared." He paused, his voice thick with emotion. "But then Riley fixed a lawyer's car, and that lawyer turned out to be someone who saw past our small shop and our modest means to what really mattered, the truth. Marcus. Davidson didn't have to help us. He chose to. And in doing so, he reminded me that there are still people who fight for what's right, even when there's nothing in it for them." Tom raised his glass. "To Marcus, who proved that honor and justice aren't dead. And to my daughter Riley, who's the best mechanic I've ever known and who had the good sense to do excellent work even for people who didn't initially appreciate it." Everyone raised their glasses, and Marcus felt his throat tighten. These were people he'd known for barely 2 months, yet their gratitude was profound and genuine. After dinner, as people dispersed into smaller conversation groups, Riley gestured for Marcus to follow her to the garage. The space was immaculately organized, typical of both Hendersons, Marcus had come to realize. The covered car was indeed a 1967 Mustang, candy apple red under the protective tarp. "Dad's project," Riley explained. "He's been restoring it for about 5 years. It's almost done, just needs the interior finished and some final detail work." "It's beautiful work," Marcus said, examining the clean engine bay and the pristine body panels. Riley leaned against a workbench, her expression thoughtful. "Can I ask you something? Why did you really take our case? And don't say it was just to make up for your initial attitude. There's more to it than that." Marcus considered the question carefully. Through the window, he could see the party continuing inside, people laughing and relaxed. You want the honest answer? Always. Because seeing you work, seeing your competence and professionalism in the face of my prejudice, made me realize how often I've probably made similar judgments without even knowing it. In my work, in my life, I'm supposed to be someone who sees people clearly, who judges them on merit. But that day with my BMW showed me I'm as susceptible to bias as anyone. He paused, organizing his thoughts. Taking your case was partly about making amends, yes, but it was also about proving something to myself, that I could recognize when I'm wrong and actually do something meaningful about it, that I could use my skills for more than just corporate mergers and contract disputes. Riley nodded slowly. You know what I learned from all this? That giving people second chances isn't just good for them, it's good for you too. If I'd written you off as just another arrogant client, we both would have missed out on something important. Wise observation for someone not even 30. I'm 29, thank you very much, Riley said with mock indignation. And I learned from the best. My dad's been giving people second chances his whole life. Cars, customers, employees who screwed up. He always says everyone deserves a chance to prove they're better than their worst moment. They talked for another hour in the garage, their conversation ranging from mechanics to law to life philosophy. Marcus found himself more relaxed than he'd been in months, enjoying the easy rapport he'd developed with Riley. She was brilliant in her own way, her intelligence applied to engines and systems rather than statutes and precedents, but no less impressive for the difference. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Marcus found Tom in the kitchen, washing dishes despite multiple offers of help. Let me help with that, Marcus offered, grabbing a towel. You're a guest, Tom protested. I'm family now, apparently. That's what Riley told her. Uncle Frank, when he asked who I was. Tom smiled, handing Marcus a wet plate. She's right about that. You went to war for us, Marcus. That makes you family in any way that matters. They worked in companionable silence for a few minutes before Tom spoke again. I heard from our insurance company yesterday. They're investigating Hutchins for fraud across multiple claims. Apparently, your work on our case opened up a whole investigation. They think he might have defrauded them out of over $100,000 over the past decade. Good. People like Hutchins count on victims being too scared or too poor to fight back. The moment someone does fight back, the whole scheme collapses. Well, thanks to you, a lot of small businesses are going to be safer. The Auto Shop Association is already circulating Hutchins' information and warning signs to watch for. Tom rinsed another plate and handed it over. You changed things, Marcus. Really changed things. Later, as Marcus prepared to leave, Riley walked him to his car. The night had turned cold, but remained clear, stars visible above despite Portland's light pollution. So, I was thinking, Riley began, your valve cover gasket is probably ready to be replaced. That leak I mentioned back in October. You're probably due for service. Marcus laughed. Is this your way of making sure I come back to the shop? Maybe. Or maybe I'm just being a responsible mechanic. Bring it by next week. I promise not to judge you for waiting too long on recommended maintenance. Fair enough. And Riley, thank you for today, for including me in your family's celebration. It meant a lot. You earned it. She paused, then added, You know, when you first brought in your BMW, I thought you were just another uptight lawyer who treated his car better than people. I'm glad I was wrong. We were both wrong about each other. Turns out that's not always a bad thing. Driving home through Portland's quiet streets, Marcus reflected on the strange journey that had begun with a check engine light and a moment of prejudice. He'd gained more than just a skilled mechanic. He'd found friends, purpose, and a reminder of why he'd gone into law in the first place. His phone buzzed at a stoplight. A text from Riley. Safe drive. And seriously, don't wait too long on that valve cover. I know where you live now. Marcus smiled and typed back. Noted. Same time next year for Thanksgiving? The response came immediately. "You're stuck. With us now. No escaping." Over the following weeks, Marcus brought his BMW in for the valve cover service. He also referred 3 colleagues to Henderson's Auto, all of whom reported back with glowing reviews. Word spread through the legal community about Marcus's pro bono work on the Henderson case, leading to several similar cases being referred to him. Small businesses being threatened with frivolous lawsuits by opportunistic plaintiffs. Marcus took on 2 more cases, both pro bono, both resulting in dismissals and sanctions against the plaintiffs. He developed a reputation as someone who would fight for the underdog, someone who used his big firm resources to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. In January, the Oregon State Bar suspended Brennan Krause's license for 2 years and required him to pay restitution to several businesses he'd helped defraud. Derek Hutchins was charged with insurance fraud and ultimately pleaded guilty, receiving probation and a requirement to pay back nearly $90,000 he'd fraudulently obtained over the years. The victory felt good, but what felt better was the friendship that had developed between Marcus and the Hendersons. He became a regular at the shop, not just for service, but to talk shop with Riley and Tom, to learn about cars and mechanics, to share stories about cases and clients. In February, Riley called him with an unusual request. "Remember how you wrote up our case for training at your firm about unconscious bias?" "Of course. It's been really well received. Why?" "The Auto Shop Association wants me to do a similar presentation about customer service and professionalism. Would you be willing to come and share your perspective, the before and after of working with our shop?" Marcus didn't hesitate. "Absolutely." The presentation took place at a hotel conference room in March, attended by about 70 shop owners and mechanics from across Oregon. Riley spoke first, discussing the importance of documentation, professionalism, and treating every customer with respect, regardless of preconceptions. Then Marcus took the stage. "I'm going to tell you about the day I became a better person," he began, "and how that journey started with me being kind of a jerk about my BMW." He walked them through the entire story, his initial skepticism, Riley's grace under pressure, the quality of her work, and how it all led to the lawsuit defense and the broader fight against fraud. He talked about unconscious bias, about the importance of giving people chances to prove themselves, and about how the best business relationships are built on mutual respect. The room was silent, engaged. After he finished, a shop owner in the back raised his hand. "So you're saying you became friends with your mechanic because she called you out on your attitude?" "No," Marcus corrected. "I became friends with my mechanic because she did excellent work despite my attitude, and because I was smart enough to recognize quality when I saw it. The friendship came later, built on mutual respect and shared values." Another hand went up. "And now you refer all your lawyer friends to her shop?" "Only the ones with nice cars that I want to make sure are properly maintained," Marcus said with a smile. "But yes, I recommend Henderson's Auto to anyone who asks, because Riley and Tom represent the best of what this industry can be, skilled, honest, and dedicated to their craft." After the presentation, several shop owners approached Marcus and Riley with their own stories of frivolous lawsuits and fraudulent claims. Marcus collected information, making notes about patterns and potential larger investigations. This wasn't just about one shop or one case anymore. It was about protecting an entire industry from predatory behavior. That evening, over dinner at a local restaurant, Riley, Tom, and Marcus celebrated the successful presentation. "You know what's funny?" Tom said, cutting into his steak. 6 months ago, if someone had told me my daughter would be doing presentations with a corporate lawyer about professional development, I'd have thought they were crazy." "Life's strange that way," Riley agreed. "Speaking of which, Marcus, I have news. I'm thinking about expanding my certifications. There's an advanced diagnostics program starting in April, and I'm considering applying." "You absolutely should," Marcus encouraged. "You're already one of the best." Might as well have the paper credentials to prove it. It's expensive, though. 10,000 for the whole program. Marcus exchanged a glance with Tom, who nodded slightly. What if I told you the Oregon Legal Aid Fund wanted to make a donation to offset the cost? As thanks for your help in identifying the fraud pattern that led to multiple successful prosecutions. Riley's eyes narrowed. Did you set this up? The fund administrators set it up. I might have mentioned that you were interested in advanced training and that your expertise had been valuable in several cases. They have discretionary funds for supporting people who've contributed to justice in Oregon. It's completely legitimate. Riley looked at her father, who shrugged with a smile. Don't look at me. I think it's a great idea. I can't just accept $10,000, Riley protested. It's not a gift, Marcus clarified. It's an investment in someone who's proven they use their skills to help others. Plus, there's a condition. You have to agree to teach a class on automotive fraud indicators to other mechanics once you complete the program. Riley sat back, processing. Finally, she smiled. You're sneaky. You know that? I'm a lawyer. It's literally my job. As spring arrived in Portland, bringing its characteristic mix of rain and sudden sunshine, Marcus found his life had changed in subtle but significant ways. He still worked long hours at the firm, still handled complex corporate cases, but he'd carved out time for pro bono, work that felt meaningful. He'd also carved out time for friendships that existed outside the legal world, relationships built on authenticity rather than professional networking. His BMW continued to run flawlessly, serviced regularly by Riley, with the kind of care that came from genuine passion for the craft. But more importantly, the relationship he'd developed with the Hendersons had given him something he hadn't realized he was missing: connection to people who valued him for who he was, rather than what he could do for them professionally. One Saturday in late April, Marcus stopped by the shop to find Riley working on his car, performing the routine maintenance he'd scheduled. He grabbed a rolling stool and sat nearby, watching her work with practiced efficiency. You know, he said, I was thinking about the day we met, how certain I was that you couldn't possibly know enough about BMWs to work on mine properly. Riley glanced over, wiping her hands. And now? Now I tell everyone you're the best mechanic alive, which is true, but it's also a reminder to myself not to make assumptions. We all make assumptions, Marcus. The trick is being willing to revise them when evidence proves us wrong. She returned to the engine bay, her movements confident and sure. Like I assumed all corporate lawyers were soulless sharks who only cared about billable hours. Fair point. What changed your mind? You fought for my dad and me like we were your most important clients. You didn't have to do that. The fact that you did told me everything I needed to know about who you really are. As Marcus watched Riley work, he thought about all the moments that had led to this friendship. The check engine light, the apology, the lawsuit, the Thanksgiving dinner, the presentations and cases and conversations, each one a small choice that had compounded into something larger than its individual parts. Riley, he said. Yeah? Thank you for giving me a second chance, for being patient with my learning curve, for being a friend. She looked up from the engine bay, her expression warm. Thank you for being worth the second chance, and for reminding me that people can surprise you in good ways, if you let them. The spring sun broke through the clouds, sending a shaft of light through the open bay door. Marcus's BMW gleamed under Riley's expert care, and somewhere in the shop, a radio played classic rock at low volume. It was an ordinary moment in an ordinary auto shop, but it represented something extraordinary: the power of humility, second chances, and genuine human connection. Marcus had come to Henderson's Auto Repair looking for a mechanic. He'd found so much more: a teacher, a friend, and a reminder that expertise and wisdom come in many forms, often from the most unexpected sources. And his BMW, It ran better than ever, maintained by hands that knew their craft intimately, cared for by someone who took pride in excellence, just as it should be.